Back in January, TikTok influencer Azariah Southworth put out a very interesting video. It didn't have any evidence, it didn't have any proof to support the claim, but nevertheless, it is something that definitely shocked the Christian world. And what came the very next day? An announcement that had many people asking questions. Now, I had heard about this, but I refrained. I was like, okay, I'm not going to come on here and make a video about this. I mean, it was just the guy came out and said what he said. We didn't hear anything from the actual individual who was being accused. However, that one video from Azariah, it may in fact, it may very well help to expose what they called a decades-long secret in Nashville as it comes to one of Christian contemporary music's biggest artists, that being Michael Tait, formerly of DC Talk and also the Newsboys. It was one day after that video from Azariah, Michael Tait announced his very, out of nowhere, just resignation from Newsboys as the frontman. Now, his statement talked about how this was even a surprise to him. I'm sure it was. Obviously, it wasn't something that he had planned to do. But he talked about how he had been in deep prayer about this decision and how he had been in fasting about it. Looking back on that, I wonder if that was really the case. He thanked the Newsboys for 15 years of being with the band and all that they had accomplished together. That was it, right? He was gone. The Newsboys at the time said that they were going to continue on without Tait. They thanked him for his contributions to the band for over a decade. And that was it. We didn't hear anything else. They did not address allegations, nothing like that at all. Now, what Azariah said in the video was that, plain and simple, Michael Tait, he's interested in the same kind, if you know what I mean. Okay? Basically living a double life. But this came again without any sort of proof, any evidence, nothing like this at all. Now, fast forward to just a couple of weeks ago. I did a video about the Newsboys and their Canadian tour being canceled. There's a whole video I did, and you can go back on my channel and watch it. I actually played the clip from the promoter of Faith Live, who was actually breaking down in tears on this video, announcing that, due to, all sorts of things with the band and them not meeting certain requirements, and Faith Live not knowing, who the new lead singer was of the Newsboys, and how fans had been counting on Michael Tait, that, fans weren't familiar with this new singer. There was less interest in people coming to the shows. The ticket sales were down, right? There was promotional material that Faith Live claimed that the Newsboys were supposed to provide to them that they did not. Now, the Newsboys had responded to that and they're basically saying it's on Faith Live. But I was wondering, I said, why is it that she's so upset? And then we find out that they had learned. Now, they didn't say this in their statement, that being Faith Live, the Canadian promoter. But they said that they had been made aware through credible sources of something more serious behind the scenes involving Tait and his departure. Also, Faith Live was told on multiple occasions by, the Newsboys management that if anybody asks you any questions specifically regarding Tait's departure, do not address them. And I said, uh-oh, that's not good. That's not good. I mean, you had the Newsboys right after Tait's departure. They were going back into the studio and they were re-recording vocals, taking, Michael Tait off of certain songs that they had already worked on. So I'm like, something's going on here, right? And again, you heard the promoter at Faith Live again. She was crying. She was breaking down. I was like, what happened here? Well, it looks like now we may know. We may know why Michael Tait left the Newsboys and why he has been silent for the last 6 months since the news. A major report has been released. This has been part of now a 2.5-year investigation into Michael Tait with shocking allegations from three men who have alleged all sorts of inappropriate behavior that has happened to them at the hands of Michael Tait. We're talking about allegations that go back as far as 2004, all the way to 2014. So we are going to discuss it here for you today. I hope you guys are ready for this. It's just so disappointing that these things continue to happen. Get your coffee ready. I got mine. And man, in doing my research for this, I had to go through a lot of coffee because each story of these survivors is just, it's unbelievable. We're going to talk about it. Before we go any further, though, I want to welcome all of you to Not By Sight News. Yes, a blind Christian guy here reporting to you, reminding you as always that we walk by faith, not by sight. For someone like me, that's kind of my only option. If you guys could, I need you to do me a huge favor. Please hit that like button for me. We have a likes goal on these videos, trying to get at least 500 likes on each video that we do. So happy to say that on yesterday's pair of videos, we smashed that likes goal on both videos. So thank you guys so much for that. I want to try and keep that consistent with all the videos. So can you help me get it again? Remember, it just takes a very quick second to smash the like button. Also, please share the video around. That too will help us get more traction on it, get it out there more in the algorithm in the recommended section to a wider audience so that we can further expose the church corruption, call out those wolves in the pulpit, and protect the vulnerable. If you could do me one more additional favor, just double check your notifications. Make sure you have them put into the all position so that you are not missing a single video that I am putting out. Especially if you are a newer subscriber, when you first sub to a channel, they're going to default your notifications over to the personalized option. So you have to go in there, manually change that over to all, and then you should be good to go. Thank you guys for that, and I hope that you are all having a blessed day. I want you guys to make sure that you stick with me here through the duration of this video, because I am going to be bringing to you the stories of now three men who have come forward as part of this investigation with allegations against Michael Tait. It's very important information to bring to you. And I am also going to give you the Newsboys' official response to these allegations, because they have now responded as well. And, well, we'll get into it. I want you guys to, again, make sure you stick with me here through the duration of this video. Now, these survivors who have come forward, I want to point out, this is, again, was part of a 2.5-year investigation by the Roy's Report. I mean, you guys know them. They do excellent work when it comes to dealing with these sorts of cases. And they had a total of 50 contacts that they spoke with. As part of this investigation, they've also corroborated stories with various Christian musicians and bands, and they have text messages between some of these individuals as well. So they did a lot here as it came to their work on this story, on this case. So again, a shout out to them. How this all got started, and I'm going to give you the names here. Now, these are not the real names of these three men, okay? And they've all been a part of the Christian music industry. They all sort of met Michael Tait on various tours over the last 20 years. Okay, but the names that they're using here are Stephen, Philip, and Taylor. I'll start, and again, remember 2004, the years that these all went down, 2004, 2010, 2014. Okay, and I also want to point out to here that there is a very high chance that there could be more victims, okay? I'm not saying that there is, but when you are looking at a pattern like this with Michael Tait as we go through it, to me, it seems like there could be more because this doesn't really get into anything during Michael Tait's time with DC Talk. That all kind of came to an end there at the, the end of the 90s and into the early 2000s, and then DC Talk broke up, never to get back together again. They did some songs together here and there, but never any full-length album or tour since, again, going all the way back to, the late 90s. So we'll see. We'll see in fact. And look, we've all said this, that is there we know there's corruption in the church, but ladies and gentlemen, there is just as much corruption within Christian music, within CCM, okay? A lot of artists posing as believers, having a form of godliness, but when you see what they're doing in the background on these tours, it's absolutely disgusting. So it's all linked together. Let me talk here about Stephen. The other interesting thing about not just, with Stephen, Philip, and Taylor, all of them, when they met Michael Tait, were 22 years old. So it's important that you know, so they were of age, they were adults, but it doesn't excuse what we're going to talk about here with Tait's behavior. Stephen was part of another Christian band, okay? The Chris Sly Band. Some of you may remember them. Now, the Chris Sly Band chose to go on the record for this story because they wanted to stand in solidarity with their former bandmate. So they had absolutely no problem with going on the record for this. Now, Stephen tells his story about meeting Michael Tait. And again, this is part of a tour, and they got to work with him a little bit. And he was starstruck. And that's a theme with the rest of these guys. They were starstruck while meeting Michael Tait. And, well, a friendship would strike up between the two. But that friendship all of a sudden started to cross some lines. The band knew that Stephen was hanging around with Michael Tait. Again, this was like this guy's idol. Loved DC Talk growing up, loved the Newsboys. So Stephen and Michael Tait would exchange numbers. They would go to movies together. But then one night in particular, Michael Tait had invited Stephen to come inside his nice mansion there in Nashville. He said, hey, come on inside. Now, Stephen tells the story that Tait actually had another family living with him at the time. And Tait invites him in. They go into the kitchen, and what does Tait do? He pulls out some alcohol. The alcohol is going to be a theme in these stories as well. Heavy consumption of alcohol by Michael Tait. And, and again, you hear this and you think, this is supposed to be a Christian musician. Why is this guy, hitting the bottle so hard? I mean, you guys, this happens more than you know, okay? It shouldn't, but it does. So he offers Stephen, alcohol, and they start drinking, and they drink a lot, okay? They drink a lot. I mean, to the point where, they were going outside, and Stephen talks about how he was out of his mind, right? He was completely out of his mind, and he was in no condition, obviously, to drive or to go home. Now, this is sort of what Stephen had been detailing here, this prepping behavior, and I'm using that word in place of another. You guys know what I'm referring to, by Michael Tait. And, well, he ended up on the couch, and he passed out because of the alcohol. But what came next? Absolutely disgusting. Stephen says that he can remember, as he was starting to come to, Michael Tait had his hand down south on Stephen, if you know what I mean. In addition to that, was working up quite a bit of a smooch storm on Stephen as he was there on the couch. Stephen was aware of what was happening. Again, remember, he had consumed all this alcohol. I mean, Tait had all sorts of it in the house. All the hard stuff. And he told Tait, no, not interested in this. Now, a word that came to mind in all three of these stories that we're going to be talking about here, when all of these things go down, is the word frozen. They were frozen because they couldn't believe what was happening to them at the hands of somebody that they respected so much in Christian music, from Michael Tait. They almost didn't even want to believe it, that it was actually happening. So it would eventually stop because Stephen's like, no, I don't want this. And as I mentioned before, Tait had a family living with him in his house at the time. And so, Tait made sure to get Stephen out of the house before 6 a.m. because I guess that's when everybody was going to start waking up. And he didn't want people in the house to see Stephen there. So he ended up leaving. Oh, I'll mention this other part because I forgot to bring this up. And again, guys, I do all this research. I use a screen reader for my computer. I can't come on here and just read you an article. So I have to do all of this from memory in my research. It takes me a lot of time to do this and go through it. So I don't want to, this is an important point that I almost left this out. I'm very thankful that the Lord brought that back to my memory. It all sort of started with the whole thing on the couch with Michael Tait saying, "Oh, I'll give you a foot massage," which is weird, right? A foot massage? They had been, consuming heavy amounts of alcohol. He's on the couch, and here's this Christian musician that he's, I'll give you a foot massage. Weird. But he said, okay, right? I mean, he's kind of sloshed, and that's when he had fallen asleep. And then the other things that I just mentioned happened thereafter. So even after this, Stephen talked about how he still maintained his contact with Michael Tait. You have to understand, they would go to bars together, right? They would hang, they were in bars all the time, doing like playing, throwing darts and all these sorts of things. They would go to dinner together, movies, all of it. And Stephen would tell his bandmates in the Chris Sly band about, hey, again, we're good friends. But he told them about the foot massage. He told them about the foot massage, and they all thought that was kind of strange, but he didn't really go into the other stuff that happened. And eventually he would tell them, and, because they were razzing him for this and saying that, oh, you must be a word that rhymes with hay. They didn't know that what had happened to Stephen was, full on crossing the lines mistreatment. And they had a different view of it, a different perspective of it, once they heard the full story from Stephen and everything that had gone down. Now, eventually, when another time where Stephen and Tait had gone out, hang out, he brought up the incident. And he told Tait, I think you owe me an apology. And he was like, for what? And he said, obviously for what you did. And he says that at that point, Tait said, oh, I'm sorry. Now, I want you to understand that in all of these cases, none of these incidents were reported to law enforcement. Because for these survivors, they felt that it was not their story to tell. They didn't want to get him in trouble. Does this mean that, charges may not be filed at some point? It could happen. Depending on the statute of limitations and all of that, we'll have to see. So eventually the friendship stopped. It was over, and Stephen had moved on. But he wanted to come forward, and again, knowing the rumors that had already been going on and the murmurs about Tait, the alcohol and the mistreatment of others, he wanted to tell his story. And the Chris Sly band, again, has corroborated that they did, in fact, get the full story from Stephen and what happened. Let me talk to you about the second individual here. and that is Philip. Philip was another worship musician who met Michael Tait, and he was at an event where he spoke to Tait, and he says, hey, I play music too. And he's like, hey, well, can I hear some of it? And he says, yeah, I actually have some of it up on my laptop in the hotel. And he's like, cool, let's go hear it. So they went up. There was no funny business that went on at all. Nothing like that. In fact, this was, again, one of those, prepping moments where Tait was sort of taking his time with Philip, and eventually, because he was connected. And these guys knew if they wanted to make it in music, the stuff that Tait was doing, they were like, well, this is weird, but he has the ability to get me, jobs and gigs and music and all these different things. So, many of them at the time, they would just dismiss it. So eventually, I believe it was the next year, you had Philip get an invite to come out to Tait's home. He says, come out to that. There's big, big party, right? Everybody's drinking again, and again, a recurring theme here. But not only that, what would be a frequent activity is that you'd have all these guys getting in the pool, getting in the hot tub with nothing on. Okay? With nothing on. And Philip sort of knew in this situation, he was kind of the new guy, and he didn't want to, not join in, so he did. And eventually, that night, everybody would leave, and it was just Tait and Philip. They're in the hot tub. Okay, get nothing on, but then they would get out, and they would get dressed, and they were talking outside. Again, more alcohol and all of that went down. And then, this, I talked about before with the whole foot massage thing. Tait would do a little bit of a back massage on Philip. That started in the hot tub. And Philip described it as, he went down to sort of like the middle part of his back, but that was it. He stopped right there. He didn't think nothing of it. Again, just, okay, he's just whatever, right? He's Michael Tait. So, he would even do like little arm squeezes, that sort of thing. Well, Philip ended up staying the night at Tait's home. I'm sure now, as I'm about to tell you this, he wishes he could go back and not do that. All the rooms at that time were full because others were staying the night as well. Again, big Christian, CCM artist Michael Tait here, everybody. He was given the option to be in a sleeping bag on the floor in Tait's room. But Tait was like, look, you don't have to stay on the floor. I got a big king size bed. You could share it with me. Now, you and I hear this and we're like, oh boy, you know what's coming next. But for Philip, he was like, I was used to touring. You'd bunk with other, guys before. It wasn't anything that he hadn't done before. So he didn't think nothing of it. And he hops in there with Tait. And from there, as he was, trying to sleep, they were talking for a little bit. He turns over to go to sleep. All of a sudden, the back rub starts up again. And Philip at this moment, again, it's that moment where you're sort of frozen. He's like, oh boy, what are we doing here? But this time, Tait decided to go a little bit lower. And, he went down lower than the back on him. And he froze in fear, almost like you're paralyzed. But not only that, he ended up, this being Tait, putting his hands on another area over there without consent. And I think you know what I'm referring to. He told him to stop. Again, taking his fingers here and putting them in a certain area they should not be going on Philip. Philip told him no. He says, I'm not that way. And he said, at that point, Tait said he was sorry, probably felt embarrassed, and he turned around and he went back to sleep. Now, the next morning, because he stayed, again, Philip stayed there the whole rest of the night. The next morning when he woke up, Michael Tait was gone. In fact, he never received contact from Michael Tait again after that night. And he left. Never had contact with him again. Now, many of these men ended up telling their girlfriends and then eventually would become their wives about what happened. So they informed them. It wasn't like they just, kept it to themselves, or they told their bandmates. So that's what happened with Philip. And now this brings us to Taylor. And after I tell you about Taylor, and again, I want you guys to stick with me here. I'm going to get to what the Newsboys had to say. You're going to want to stick around for this, because I got some questions about that. So Taylor was a crew member, and he also, was in bands as well. So again, these people were all, performers, had been a part of Christian groups over the years. And this is the incident that was around 2014. Taylor being a crew member, and this, by the way, is going to involve the Newsboys tour bus. Again here, lots of stories about the heavy drinking with Michael Tait and other members of the Newsboys, which is concerning to me. But again, you know how these Christian artists can be. We talked about it earlier, having a form of godliness, right? But the fruit is something completely different. And for Taylor, he talks about one particular night where, everybody had, they would often stay up drinking, and sometimes they'd be smoking as well. They'd be smoking cigarettes, right? And all this. And they had a very early morning. I believe that they were due to set up for a show at like 7 a.m. And then the show would be for 7 p.m. that same night. So at this point, it's like close to 6 in the morning, and Tait and Taylor had been up near the front of the bus, and they were just talking, right? And Tait was doing the arm squeezes, that I talked about before. And, they were drinking. Again, they were drinking heavily. And Taylor said, you know what, I gotta get some sleep. It was almost 6 a.m., I guess, at this time, and he had to be up in like an hour. So, in Tait too, he would do like these bear hugs on them, right? So he knew what he was doing. And Taylor's like, all right, I'm gonna go to bed, and then Tait follows him. Now he had a bunk like in the back of the tour bus here, and I think one of the other, and it was funny because the Newsboys had this rule where you couldn't have any females on the bus. Well, I guess for Tait, wasn't interested in that anyway. But you couldn't have any women on the bus. The only one exception was, I guess, one of the Newsboys' daughters, or one of the crew members' daughters, who would sometimes be with them, and that would be it. When that was the case, then Taylor said that he had the bunk, I guess it was like all the way in the back. And he says Tait starts to follow him, and he figures he forgot his jacket. His jacket was back there, I guess. And Tait comes up to him and he says, "Hey, do you want some of this?" And it was this white powder, a word that rhymes with. Now, we didn't know this for sure. This is what Taylor was saying here. He did not know this for sure, but it looked like what Tait was offering him was a word that rhymes with Rogaine. Okay. And he said no. Taylor was like, no. Now, he did not know whether or not Tait himself ended up taking the substance after that. But I mean, if you're offering it to somebody, well, then chances are you are most likely using it yourself. So now we have substances involved here in these allegations. We have heavy amounts of alcohol consumption. We have mistreatment. It's awful. But it didn't stop there. For Taylor, he then ended up going to sleep, right? And there wasn't much time. He only had about an hour, so it was going to be just a little nap, really. And all of a sudden, he's laying there. He gets woken up. He's stirred because Tait ends up coming back and has his hand, in an area it shouldn't be, going like this and stuff. And he didn't say anything here at the time. He said, because he was frozen in fear. I told you guys, frozen, that's the word, right? With all of these victims and their experiences with Tait. Frozen. So he said, I'm going to try to stir and I'm going to move around and make him think that I'm waking up and maybe he'll leave. And he did. And he ended up leaving at that point. And this would be something, too, that Taylor would end up telling his eventual wife about what happened. She was not surprised, knowing how the Christian music industry can be. She is somebody that was also involved with Christian music. So this was Taylor's story. And I wonder how many more are out there that we don't know about. How many more are out there that we don't know about? Michael Tait and his double life, right? Now, I want to remind you guys, if you want to read the full report, okay, because I'm giving you guys a summary of all of these stories, but if you want to go and read it, because again, I can't read you the report, obviously, here. I'm giving you my summary just based off my research and just doing this all from my memory of what I had researched, again, using my screen reader and everything that I'm able to do. But you can go to juliaroyce.com and they have the full article up there right now. I want to get to the Newsboys' response because they issued a statement on their Instagram on Thursday, June 5th. And this is what they said. They actually admitted this. They said that prior to Michael Tait announcing that he was leaving the group, he confessed to them. He confessed to them that he was living a double life. Now remember again the TikTok video from Azariah, where he came out and said that Michael, Tait was, what? Word that rhymes with hey. But here now we have the Newsboys on June 5th responding. They said they read the report. And they said, we have to confess this. Michael Tait approached us prior to his resignation and told us that he was living a double life. Why was that never made mention by the Newsboys at any single point since then in these last 6 months? Go back to what I said about the Canadian promoter and how she was told that if questions arise surrounding Tait, don't acknowledge them. That's dishonest. Because you were expecting people to show up to a show. There had been absolutely, no transparency in this at all. Just that Tait fasted and he was in prayer about this. And this came as a shock to him as well that he was going to be leaving. Now we really know why he left. If these allegations are true, it's clear as day. And the Newsboys are now telling you that Michael Tait confessed to them that he was living a double life. For how long? We don't know. These allegations, again, only go back to 2004. What happened prior to 2004? I mean, I can only imagine what some of those road stories are like with DC Talk. And I love DC Talk. But even Kevin Max has gone all crazy now with, just look it up. Kevin, I'll say this though. Kevin, upon hearing this would probably be very happy for Michael Tait because Kevin supports that sort of life now. That came out a few years ago, by the way, with Kevin Max Smith. So the Newsboys knew. but never revealed it to anybody. And again, Michael Tait, nothing on social media, at least at the time that I'm recording this. He has not addressed these allegations. Probably going to have to now. Probably going to have to. And then they also said this. They said, we knew that Michael Tait was living a double life. It shocked us then when he told us, because it's somebody that we worked with for 15 years, but we did not expect that it was at the level that we learned after we read the report of these men and their allegations of being mistreated by Michael Tait. The Newsboys said they were horrified by that. They said they stand with victims in this case, and they encouraged more victims to come forward. So again, what they're claiming, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are not going to believe them, they're claiming they had no idea up until January of 2025, right around the 15th of January, when Azariah's video came out. They had no idea that Michael Tait was living a double life until he told them. Do you guys believe that or not? The stuff that was going on the bus, the drinking, and all of that apparently they're involved with, I don't know if all of them drink. I'm not saying all of them do. Okay? But when you again, look at the stories here of Stephen, Philip, and Taylor, they all mention drinking. Taylor, more specifically with him on the tour bus, and, he talked about going out to bars with them, like Buffalo Wild Wings and things like this. So this was sort of the culture. But do you believe, and again, you guys got to let me know in the comment section, do you believe that the Newsboys they were just completely unaware that Michael Tait was on the other side, right? That he was the word that rhymes with hay. That he was in the hay life. Do you guys believe that? And do you expect Michael Tait to respond? That this is all out there. Now that the Newsboys have basically come out and said again, yeah, we'll admit it, he confessed to us that he was living a double life right before he announced his departure from the group. That's wild to me. Do you think that the Newsboys should have been transparent about this? Because it seemed like, according to that Canadian promoter, they didn't want to let anybody know about, again, if you got questions coming in, don't answer them. That's dishonest to me. That's very dishonest to me. The Newsboys in their statement talked about, we're fathers, and they talked about that, how we wouldn't tolerate this. This is horrible. But you know what, man? If you had knowledge, if you had any sort of inkling, and you guys kept quiet about it, man, that's not good. Again, they're claiming they didn't. I'm not saying they did, but they're claiming they only knew that he was living a double life when he told them in January. They didn't know about any of these other instances. I do not know the exact words that Michael Tait used when he told the Newsboys. I don't know if he just came out and just straight up said, well, funny I use the word straight, but I don't know if he came out and said, hey guys, I'm hay. That's what we're using here. I'm hay. So I got to leave the group. I'm sorry. I can't believe that for 15 years of working with this guy, the Newsboys had no idea. None? What did I say at the beginning? They called it the worst kept secret in all of Nashville in the CCM scene. Guys, this is messed up. This ain't right. And again, I think there'll be more victims. I don't think it's just these three. We'll see. We will see what else comes of this. Does this in any way, if you are a fan of the Newsboys, if you were a fan of DC Talk, does this in any way, because I know I've previously heard from many of you who were still were Newsboys fans when I did my video about the Canadian promoter. Does this now change anything for you with these stories now and these new allegations in this just blockbuster report from Julie Roys and her team over there? Let me know what you guys think. Sound off down below in the comment section. We always encourage everybody to get involved in the discussion, as it does help the video to perform better with more engagement. Don't forget as well our likes goal. We are trying to get at least 500 likes on each video that we do. Can you guys help me get there? It just takes, remember, a quick second to smash that like button. Also, please share the video around. That too will help us get more traction, get it out more in the algorithm in the recommended section to a wider audience, so that we can further expose the church corruption, call out those wolves in the pulpit, and protect the vulnerable. If you really enjoy and appreciate the work of Not by Sight News and you would like to see this great work continue, would you consider making a generous donation to support and fund our operation here? I always say, I'm not here to promote to you a false prosperity gospel. We just ask that if you enjoy and appreciate the work being done, you find it important, you would think about giving to us. You'd also be helping us out in what has been a very tumultuous 9 months for myself and my wife with all of her health issues, including suffering a stroke, a clotting disorder, lupus, and even Bell's palsy. We're powering through it as best we can, but I've certainly felt the fear, the anxiety of all that we've gone through. If you feel led by the Lord, because I say this to you guys right now, the medical bills for all this are not cheap. So again, if you feel led by the Lord to do so, if you would like to make a contribution to help us out, maybe you just enjoy the work that we're doing overall and you would like to bless us because of that, we have multiple ways you can do so. One is by going over to our GoFundMe. We set up a GoFundMe to help out. The link to that is in the description of this video and all videos. You can also become a monthly partner with us for as little as just $5 a month by going over to our Patreon, patreon.com/notbysightnews. That link also in the description. Finally, you can just hit the super thanks button on the YT video here. Although I will tell you that if you choose that option, that YT does take 30% for themselves. So if you do want to make sure we get the majority of your generous gift, then GoFundMe or Patreon will be your best option. And we, again, thank you so much for the support. We cannot do this without you. What I want to do right now, something I do on all these videos, and that's end this video on hope. It's part of my ministry outreach. This is an altar call. I've been doing this on my videos since 2016. No matter what it is that I am discussing in the church, we always want to give people the opportunity to receive Christ as Savior. That being said, anybody watching now, if you are somebody who has not yet received Jesus as Lord and Savior and you would like to do so, I want to lead you in a prayer to do that right now. This is a prayer you could do in your own words, but I will give you the steps you need to bring it before the Lord today. First thing you want to do right off the top, acknowledge you are a sinner. That is something that we all are. The good news is that God gave his only son, Jesus Christ, to die on that cross for the sins of all the world, as he died and rose again for you and me. He paid the cost. What you have to do is repent of your sin. That means to turn from sin, not just to say you're sorry and jump back to your old ways, but to actually turn from sin, which are those lifestyles, patterns, habits, behaviors, things in your life that go against the Word of God. If you humbly go before the Lord, though, and ask him to forgive you, he'll wipe your sin away. Bible says he doesn't remember it any longer. And then you invite Jesus into your life to be your Lord and Savior. When you do that, you become born again, a child of God. You will have eternal life. Trust me when I tell you there is no greater decision that you will ever make than the one you do to give your life to Christ. And I pray you make that decision today. Again, more info down below. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be back with more. You guys take care. Please be safe out there. God bless each and every single one of you. And I'll talk with you soon.